أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن نجمع عظامه بلى قادرين على أن نسوي بنانا بل يريد الإنسان ليهجر أمامه يسأل أيان يوم القيامة فإذا بلغ البصر وخسف القمر وجمع الشمس والقمر يقول الإنسان يومئذ أين المفر كلا لا وزر إلى ربك يومئذ المستقر صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات.
السلام علیکم. آپ سب کو جشن امام زین العابدین علیہ السلام مبارک. 4 مصرے میں پیش کر رہا ہوں. ایک درود بھیج دے محمد و آل محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد. دین کو پلکوں پر بٹھایا سید سجاد نے، دین کو پلکوں پر بٹھایا سید سجاد نے، نام خالق کو بچایا سید سجاد نے، اور ظلم کیا قیدی بناتا سید سجاد کو، ظلم کیا قیدی بناتا سید سجاد کو، ظلم کو قیدی بنایا سید سجاد نے، ظلم کو قیدی بنایا سید سجاد نے. ایک درود بھیج دے محمد و آل محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد. منقبت کی چند اشعار پیش کروں. شفا کی سلطنت کے مالک و مختار آتے ہیں، شفا کی سلطنت کے مالک و مختار آتے ہیں، مناؤ جشن صحت عابد بیمار آتے ہیں، مناؤ جشن صحت عابد بیمار آتے ہیں، اور بدن پر زخم جب زنجیر سے ہر بار آتے ہیں، عیادت کو میری خود عابد بیمار آتے ہیں، اور لحد میں یہ فرشتوں نے کہا سجاد کے شاعر، لحد میں یہ فرشتوں نے کہا سجاد کے شاعر، تجھے شاباش دینے حیدر کرار آتے ہیں، تجھے شاباش دینے حیدر کرار آتے ہیں، اور علی کو جب کبھی مشکل میں آواز دیتا ہوں، علی کو مشکل میں آواز دیتا ہوں، علی کے ساتھ میں سجاد بھی ہر بار آتے ہیں، علی کے ساتھ میں سجاد بھی ہر بار آتے ہیں، اور ہٹا کر بھیڑ کو بولا ادب سے خانہ کعبہ، ہٹا کر بھیڑ کو بولا ادب سے خانہ کعبہ، زہے قسمت میری جانب میرے سرکار آتے ہیں، زہے قسمت میری جانب میرے سرکار آتے ہیں، شفا کی سلطنت کے مالک و مختار آتے ہیں۔ ایک درود بھیجے محمد وآل محمد۔
Jazakallah Brother Salman for the beautiful recitation. Inshallah, we're going to continue our program with speech by Maulana Syed Asad Jafri. Inshallah, tomorrow night will be the conclusion of the 4-night series, so be sure to tune in for that. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for the sponsors of tonight's program, Brother Zahid Jafri and Sister Nageen Fatima and Dr. Jafar Mahdi and family. If you would like to sponsor the program, please contact us via email or WhatsApp. With that, please help me invite Maulana Syed Asad Jafri to the member with the loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون والذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وأحلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا وإن الله لمع المحسنين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. I send my Mubarak and Tabruk and Tabrik to all of you and the Imam of our time, to my beloved sisters and brothers in the City of Knowledge, Dallas community, on this Waladat Basa'adat of our fourth Imam, Imam Zain al-Abideen alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you, bring beauty to your worship, and include you amongst the Sajideen, inshallah. I have been with all of you, or rather you are stuck with me now for the past couple of nights, and now you are stuck with me for now 2 more nights. You're almost there. After tonight, there's 1 more night, and then you're free of this mug. And inshallah, may Allah give you patience to deal with me and my lectures. But, the discussion has been around the fact that when we are celebrating such grand personalities, such great men like we are in these 4, finishing off with Janabi Ali Akbar tomorrow, we have to find a reoccurring theme, and one of them is that all 4 of them on the plains of Karbala, the day of Ashura, gave their life for reform. We're not happy with how things were Islamically, And all throughout, it wasn't just only about the grand mission at hand. Of course it was. But if you look at their individual roles that they played, there is a lot of lessons to be extracted and derived from the lessons. Last time I talked about the loyalty and courage of Abul Fazl al-Abbas. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll look at the youth and the sacrifice, and the confidence that and the certainty that Ali Akbar had in the deen. And tonight, given the fact that we are here tonight to celebrate the birth of this Imam, born on the 5th of Sha'aban in the year 38 after Hijrah, was Shaheed on the 25th of Muharram, the year was 95th after Hijrah. He lived for 57 years, of which 34 of them he was an Imam. On the day of Ashura, Imam Sajjad was 22 years old. And he was the only surviving male on the day of Ashura who, with that trauma, with that grief, lived for 3 decades after the day of Ashura. And keeping in line our theme of reboot and revival and sort of a restart and a reset. And last night we focused on the couples and love. And, I realized last night that there are some people who are just in love with being in love. It doesn't matter who it is. They want to be in love. And when they feel like that love that they had with this first spouse is expiring or weakening, their version of love, mind you. We talked about versions of love last night. And let me rephrase my first sentence. There are those people who are in love with the idea of being in love during the honeymoon phase. They want to recapture that, right? Recapture the flowers and recapture the giggles and recapture the blushing and recapture those little, those glimpses and those glares and those stares across the room that happen in the first 6 months to a year in marriage. And after, 2 kids and a decade later, now those things obviously are going to be replaced with more concrete, with more established love that has its own version, its own symptoms, its own effects. Like I said last night, where there was once, giggles and blushing, now is a nice quiet cup of tea with the person that you love. There are some people who don't understand that. They want to always be in that honeymoon phase. So once that gets old or expired in their eyes, they start looking around to see, okay, who else can I, revive or renew or reignite that honeymoon love. Doesn't matter who it is. I just want that love. I want that. Well, find that love. Rediscover that love inside your existing spouse. That was all yesterday. And then today, in light of the fact that this Imam now has left behind 2 major practices for us, I wanted to stay on theme, of course. I wanted to look at those through the eyes of the theme that we have of a rebooting of our life. Number 1 was the obsessive, and I say that in the most respectful way, the obsessive nature that Imam Sajjad had in not only keeping the mission of Karbala alive, but keeping the dimension of grief alive. He would make it a point that even during happy occasions, there had to be some moment where they would reflect upon the tragedy that befell his father on the plains of Karbala. He would reluctantly now agree to attend a happy occasion, only on the condition that there would be some dhikr of Imam Hussein. Passing by an animal about to be sacrificed, he would ask the owner, did you give this animal some water? Of course, Mawla, we would never sacrifice an animal thirsty. In fact, we even move the other animals away so they don't have to witness the sacrifice, and that would break the Imam's heart into pieces. His father, of course, was sacrificed without a drop of water in front of his sister on the day of Ashura. There seemed to be this movement of ensuring that the grief aspect of Azadari was preserved. Now some can say, well, look, that was his father. He is a son. Of course he's going to cry for his father. We're talking about 30 years later. Even up until the last moments of his death, it's reported that Imam Sajjad would complain to his son, Imam Muhammad Baqir, that why are you giving me such a grand farewell and a grand funeral when my father was killed on the plains in the hot sands of Karbala? I lost my father, it's been 19 years, right? Of course I miss him. There's a gaping hole that can't be filled, I get it. But those tears don't come as much as they used to. And it's natural, grief goes through its stages. Of course I miss him. Of course there are moments where, in remembrance of him, I shed a tear. But the way that I would shed tears the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, year, those crying days are behind me. I can now talk about my father. I can look at a picture of my father. It took me years to get to that stage. That's just simply how grief works. So this is not about a father and a son. Imam Sajjad was trying to nurture the Muslim community through the grief of his father. I want to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about that, and then move towards the second dimension when we think about Imam Sajjad, and that is dua. All, of course, in the massive topic of rebooting ourselves. Remember, the theme and the focus is that let's forget about everybody else, let's turn inwards. Let's make sure that we have done everything we can to become the best version of us. We are always somebody who is in progress, always evolving, never comfortable. We can't be complacent. There's no time to be complacent. We don't have the energy to be complacent. We can't be individuals who are okay with the way that we are today. There has to be always incremental growth, albeit, but growth nonetheless. We got to be better than yesterday. So why the focus on tears? I get the fact that, and I'll tell you why I bring this up on such a grand occasion and such a happy month. And this is not meant to be, like Masaib or no, of course, but Azadari is the pillar of our faith, right? I always say this every year, Muharram, I shake when I think about where we would be as a Shia nation without Azadari, without Abu Abdullah al-Husayn's commemoration. So this is an annual, all year around, all the time discussion. We have to understand this is not just about a father and a son. This is about an Imam leading his people and his ummah towards salvation. And one of the areas that he leads them through is the grief of his father, the grief of the third Imam. Maybe we need to reboot the way that we look at grief. Because I'll tell you, every year in Muharram, it always comes about, and some new fitna or some new discussion always arises every single Muharram within our own Shia ranks for everybody else. That why are we a nation that always cries and cries and cries? Ringing the new year in black. All you ever see 2 months and 8 days, in certain cultures, right? It's a little bit much. Why can't we discuss the, academic, philosophical approach and analyze Imam Hussein's mission through academia as opposed to through emotion? And don't get me wrong, where Imam Sajjad had a chance to discuss the theoretical, philosophical approach of his father towards Yazid, he did. But it didn't mean it was either or. I always say this: we have to learn from Hussein while we grieve for Hussein. A lot of my youth ask me why, the night before Ashura, Imam Hussein was worshipping God. The buzzing of bees, Sheikh Abbas Qumi narrates in Nafs al-Mahmum, that was the sound of a collective dua or worship session before the day of Ashura. And yet we go from center to center, from majlis to majlis, from matam to matam, and all we do is we slap our chest, wear black, turn our back on the world for one day, and cry for Imam Hussein. It's a bit much, right? And we don't realize that these are acts of worship. Now, of course, there are limits, right? There are those people, like I said before, there are, I always find two distinct groups when it comes to the grieving aspect of Azadari. There's that group that when the Masaib starts in a speech, they walk into the hall. Then there are those when Masaib begins, they walk out. Or better yet, when Matam begins, when Sine Zeni begins inside of our center, there's a group that was outside that walks in, there's a group that was inside that walks out. And both groups, with all due respect, don't hate me, are groups that need to truly understand the mission. They haven't quite gotten it yet. If you believe that all you have to do is cry and beat your chest and nothing else, then you are mistaken. If you believe all you have to do is understand theoretically what Imam Hussein did, you're also mistaken. Learn from Hussein while you grieve for Hussein. They go hand in hand. Imam Sajjad was a manifestation of this exact principle throughout his life for 34 years after the day of Ashura until he was buried in Baqi. He made it a mission of his to assure that these two were not separate. To the point where his own companions would say, how long will you cry, Mawla? Kab tak roenge? How long will you cry? And that's when he says very famously that, Nabi Yaqub knew Nabi Yusuf was safe, alive, albeit in a different country. But the sheer distance and absence from his son made him cry until his eyes went blind. The whiteness of the eyes was gone. That's acceptable. That's okay. But here, in front of my eyes, not only my father, but several members of my family killed in the most brutalist way, and you question my tears. The question is why? What is it about the tears? Now, letter number 31 of Nahj al-Balagha, a letter that Imam Ali wrote to his son Imam Mujtaba alayhi salam. Very beautiful letter, a loving letter, one that I think that we should revisit once in a while if you can. At least extract one paragraph, apply it, and then watch our life change. In there, very famously, Imam Ali says that the heart of the youth is like uncultivated land. You've heard this 1,000 times. I want you to now see it through the lens of the tears of Imam Hussein. So you go a little bit north in Dallas. There's lots of land in Dallas. Last time I was there, there were stretches of, especially around Austin and northern Texas. There's a bunch of land, just sitting there, wanting to be owned. So you end up, you and your investment group end up now purchasing 2 acres or 3 acres of land. Okay, it's uncultivated, right? It's barren. There's nothing on it. You one day want to build homes. Let's say build a smart center, build a strip mall, whatever the case may be. And you look at the land and it has to be cultivated. It's not ready for any growth. You remove the weeds, you remove the twigs, you get the ground, you get the ground ready, and whatever you plant in that's what you'll see in 2 decades, 3 decades from now. Unless, of course, you destroy the whole product and you start all over again. Now, Texas, of course, just got hit with a massive storm. You were able to feel a little bit of the cold that we feel every year in Toronto. And I'm happy to know that things are now somewhat back to normal. At least that's what I hear. I hope that's the case for the majority of you. Like I said in the first message, my heart was with all of you, and I really prayed hard for you. I mean, the images and some of the news coming out of Texas was devastating. And I'm happy to know that all of you survived it. I hope, inshallah, without any major damage or major tragedy. Anyways, so sometimes, in Toronto, when it gets frigid cold, like it has been for the past month here, trying to plant anything outside in my backyard is almost impossible. It's rock hard until it softens. How do I soften the land? I add water. Right? When you add water to land, it becomes cultivated. It becomes ready for growth. Now you can sit there and plant, right? The first thing I would do is I would dig up and I would water it. It's nice and soft, and begin to now plant my tomatoes and my peppers or whatever I want to grow, or begin to plant my flowers or my tulips, whatever. But without that water, it's very difficult. The heart is no different. The heart hardens as well. And when the heart hardens and is rock hard, qaswat al-qulub, as they say in the Quran, the hardening of hearts, at that moment, to plant anything in it, the seeds of taqwa, the seeds of piety, the seeds of amal saleh, almost becomes impossible. The heart has to soften, then the growth happens. Now, how do you soften the heart? The same way you soften the hardening of the land, with water. And one source of water are the tears of Imam Hussein. My young guys out there, think about when you are engrossed in that musibah, in that masa'ib, and the alim is reciting it and your tears are flowing down. The state, if you can capture the moment that your heart begins to soften now. Your worldview changes. Things that were, bugging you all day don't matter anymore. Things become irrelevant very quickly. They become minimal very quickly. And now you think about, that's why one of the times of dua, the ulama say that Allah might open up the doors a little bit more is when there are tears rolling down your face. Ask for dua, your heart is soft. It's more accepting of the truth. So Imam Sajjad here is saying, cry for my father, to soften your heart. When the heart is softened, now begin to plant the seeds of the dhikr of Allah and the fikr of Allah and tadabbur and contemplation and introspection and tafakkur. then, there's a rebooting of our stance, rebooting of how I see things. That's point number one. Point number two is dua. When we think about Imam Sajjad, we think about the treasures of du'as that he left behind in the form of Sahif al-Sajjadiyah, the 15 whispered prayers, and many other du'as that we have. I have always said that, I said it up and down this week as well, wherever I read, that one of the best treasures left behind by the school of thought of the Ahlul Bayt are the du'as and the prayers. I don't think any other sect of Islam has what we have. I don't think any other major religion has the depth and the library of du'as and ziyarat that we have. They're life-changing. Now, I'm not going to sit there and tell you, oh, dua is a weapon of a believer. Pray, ask dua, ask dua. You have Sheikh Mahdi Rastani. He's a stud of an alim. His lectures are phenomenal. I'm sure he's talked about dua several times. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I am going to say sometimes I think the approach when it comes to dua has to change. Sometimes the approach we have towards dua is a transactional approach, when really it should be a transformational approach. We live in a consumerism era, right? In an era of consumerism, in an era of branding and marketing, the customer is always right. The customer now can customize anything. Walk into a restaurant and say, look, remove the mushrooms, add tomatoes. Okay, I don't want this bread, I want that bread. Can you switch this soup, let's say, to cream of mushroom? Is it okay if instead of this I have, let's say, double vegetables? Sure, no problem. Now nowadays, of course, especially with the pandemic and certain areas locked down. Of course, now Texas is completely open now, but in my area it's locked down sometimes. Going to the mall is an option. So a lot of online shopping, man, a lot of it, right? Download the app, go to the app, choose what you want to choose. A couple of add to carts, a couple of buy nows, and if you have the right membership, bam, next morning it's at your doorstep. Pretty cool, pretty convenient. Now, so long as that package comes to me and it's the right size, the right color, and on time, I'm happy, 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 happy. If the size one day is wrong, if the color is wrong, and if it's a delayed shipping, I lose it. I write a horrible review. I tell myself I'm never buying from you again. I tell my family and friends don't buy from this company. Everything. Right? It's a very transactional relationship we have with me and my companies. Sometimes we take that and we apply it to God, don't we? Hear me out. That God, this is my dua. So long as you give me my dua the way I want it, the timing I want it, you deliver it on time, express shipping, we're good. If there's a little bit of a delay, if instead of a boy you gave me a girl as a newborn child, if instead of a summer wedding you give me a fall wedding, if instead of, let's say, for example, Hajj this year, I'm going to Hajj next year, then I begin to question, is it even a point for me to ask you or not? It becomes a transactional experience with God. And that's a problem. There's no such thing as God Prime. There isn't. I ask for a dua, and if it's prime and available in stock, great. Then that dua will come true tomorrow morning, guaranteed delivery. Right? 24 hours later, your dua is true at your door. Just pick it up. It's right there in front of your door. Instead, dua has to be looked at through the transformation of the individual. What does that mean? That means that when we ask Allah, and again, the rebooting, right? The revival, the rethinking, the resetting of our vision when it comes to dua, it's very, very important that we look at it as a moment of transformation, revolution, evolution. Let's evolve a little bit when it comes to du'as. It's transforming ourselves. When we ask Allah for something, we are telling ourselves that I believe He has the answer. You're watching a bunch of kids walk up and down your street on the night of Halloween. They have bags on, they have masks on, they're going door to door, trick or treat, right? And they are accepting candy. I want you to imagine now you are watching this one group of kids up and down your street. They go to your neighbor in front of you, right? The lights are off. There's no cars in the driveway. It's obvious no one is home. Big sign on the door: we don't have candy, please go away. But they're still gonna ding dong. Let's just try. So they'll try once. 2 minutes, no response, and they'll leave. The neighbor right beside that house is the opposite. Lights are on, cars in the driveway, pumpkins on the front porch, right? Ghouls and goblins now everywhere. Okay? There's people inside. You kind of peek inside, you see that everyone is dressed up. Even the dog has a costume on. The dog is dressed. Why is the dog dressed up? Why? Why are you making your 85-year-old grandmother put on a costume? So here now you're looking at the fact that if anyone on this street has candy, this house has candy. Now, do you think that the way those kids treated the previous house, they'll treat this house? Not a chance. They'll ring the doorbell, no response. Maybe they didn't hear me. They'll ring it again and ring it again. If the bell is enough, they'll knock with their hands. They'll bang with their fists. They'll make their hand almost broken, but they know that, look, behind this door is what I need. Is what I need. And I'm not leaving until I get it. Persistent for a little bit of a chocolate bar. Not even a full bar, those little small minis. That I don't know where they go, but small minis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is no different. Dua is an announcement that you make to your soul. This is the door that I come to fulfill my desires. This is the door that will help me in my difficulty. This is the door that will relieve me of my pain. This is the door that has all the answers for me and all the resources that I need to live a fruitful, pious, God-conscious life exists at this door. I'm having hat issues right now. All right? So what do? We persistently dua. That's why we have in the etiquettes of dua, hadith says, persistently ask Allah. Be persistent in your dua. Ask Allah, be specific in your dua. Allah, whatever is best for me. No. Ask Him, look, if this is good for me, I want A, B, C. Pray for your marriages. Pray that, the love that you want your husband to have for you is inside of his heart. Allah, please place the love for me inside my husband's heart. Place the love for me inside my wife's heart. Let her look at me with eyes of respect. Let him look at me with eyes of beauty, eyes of respect and honor. And the Quran now captures Surah Hajj, verse number 11. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. There are those amongst the men and people and human beings who worship Allah on the edge of a cliff, on the edge of a boundary, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, on the edge of a cliff, looking down on the cliff, very, very vulnerable. One little push, one little gush of wind, and they go falling down, right? So long as there's khair, وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُمْ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. So long as there's khair and good, then there is mutma'in. You give me goodness, God, I'll give you worship. You make me marry the guy I want. You give me a child, let's say next April. You make me go to Hajj. You remove COVID from my family, and I'm good. I'll give you my fasting. I'll give you my khums. I'll give you my salah. No problem. But فَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ انْقَلَبَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. The ayat says that the moment a fitna comes, a test comes, a struggle comes, when things don't go the way you planned, فَإِنْقَلَبَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. We turn our face away from Allah, almost as if we are in disgust of God. Who is this? مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهِ. Those who worship Allah. Mushrikeen, fine. Munafiqeen, fine. Kuffar, fine. That makes sense. The worshippers of God, yeah. There are some people who worship Allah with 1 foot in, 1 foot out. One more piece of news, one more test, one more denied dua, according to my timeline. One more delayed shipment. I'm done. I'm done. Why does that happen? Because we view dua as a transactional experience. It's meant to transform us. It's meant to give us hope. It's meant to, when every other door opens, that door to Allah is always there. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةِ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Whenever the da'i calls me, whenever the caller calls me, I will respond. Whenever they call me. Sometimes I wonder, do we truly understand who the Mawla is and who the Abd is, right? Who the slave is and who the master is? I don't know. I do think that we need to do a little bit of a rebooting when it comes to how we understand dua. It's important that we understand that when we ask Allah, we have that yaqeen. And again, in the etiquettes of dua, in hadith of the Ahl Bayt, it says when you ask Allah, have that yaqeen and that certainty that He's going to answer your dua. Allah, I'm asking this dua, but I know it's a long shot. I doubt you'll give it to me. Who am I to ask? But if you don't mind, if you can possibly please give. That's not a dua. I talked about munajat al-sha'baniyah, right? Look at the frankness. You grab me by the collar of my sin, I'll grab it by the collar of mercy. Dua mashlul, Allahu Akbar. The end of the dua of dua mashlul, he says, look, you told me to call upon you. I'm calling upon you. Now respond to me. If you expect me to call upon you when I'm in need, I'm doing my part. Now I expect you to answer my call. Udu'uni astajib lakum. You said call upon me, I'll answer you. Okay? I've done my part, now you do yours. There's a frankness there, man. There's an expectation there. There's a certainty there. When I knock on the door, I persist in knocking on the door. I know, look, I will knock until my knuckles bleed, but I know that I'm not going anywhere else. That's not transactional. That's revolutionary. That's building your faith, building your yaqeen, building your certainty. Dua is a powerful tool. Dua can pull you from the quicksand. Dua can actually pick you up and dust you off, provided it's not seen through the eyes of a transaction. Imam Ali, very famous, he says, 3 different people worship Allah for 3 different reasons. The tajir, the abd, the ahrar, the business person, the slave, and the free individual. That business person does tijarat with Allah. Allah, here is my worship. Here's my khums. Here's my fasting. I got up. I tried to get up every single morning before the sun got up. I fasted in the heat of the Texas summers. All this now I present to you, and I want to buy eternity of bliss in return. There are people who do that. They worship Allah out of the hope for heaven. Then there are those who have a slave mentality. Just don't upset the master. Just don't upset the master. So I worship you out of the fear of hell. Then the final and the highest realm of worship that all of us should aspire to be is someone who is free of the want of heaven and free of the fear of hell. I worship Allah because you're layiq and worthy of worship. No transaction here. Nothing. I am asking you because I don't know who else to ask. I'm asking you because I believe that you have all the answers. I'm asking you because if anybody else in this universe is worthy to ask, it's you. Think about when you get a phone call. Think about when you get a phone call. And someone says, look, I'm in a bind. I didn't know who else to call. I thought about you. Right away, you have to feel good. It's okay to say, wow, this person thought about me. What message is that person sending you? That, look, when I was stuck in a bind, the first person I thought of my 3,000 contacts on my phone was you. I had certainty you would pick up and you would somehow solve my problems. Sending them a message, sending you a message, this person has belief in me. This person has confidence in me. We do the exact same thing when it comes to God. We're scratching rock bottom, and God knows there are many of you right now listening to me who are in a very tough spot in life right now. And I pray the month of Sha'ban is a month of healing for you. Wallahi, I do pray for you. Part of that healing is to call out to God, cry to God. But not in the hopes of some transaction or some delivery happening tomorrow. Just do it to ease your pain. Allah loves to hear from you. There's a hadith I have, and I'm paraphrasing. My teacher in the house, one time I mentioned this to me, and it stuck to me years and years ago. Sometimes they'll teach you the text, and then they'll also teach you, they'll teach you some things that are good for your tarbiyat and your nurturing. He says that the Ma'asumeen have described that sometimes when we call Allah for our dua, Allah summons the angels, don't execute that dua yet. Don't execute my plan yet. Don't answer the dua yet. I like the sound of the voice of that individual calling me. It feels good to be remembered by them. It's been a long time since they've called me. I know that the moment that I answer, now I'm paraphrasing now, I know the moment that I answer this dua, they'll be gone until they need me again. And the only time they're going to sit there and interact with me is when they want a transaction to be completed. Even then, Allah says, wait a second, let them call me. Not in a cruel way, not in a way that, I enjoy your suffering. Sometimes you just like to hear from somebody. After a long time, a familiar voice, a loving voice that you have such a special place in your heart for calls you. I'm just checking in, Asad. How are you, Asad? Things are well. You don't want to get off the phone with him. You make up all sorts of weird questions. How's the weather where you are? What are the gas prices where you are? I don't know. But you just want to keep talking because you like the sound of their voice and you think they like the sound of yours. When people ask Allah, Allah loves to hear from you. Don't allow shaitan to infiltrate inside your heart and play with the image of God, that God doesn't want to hear from you. You're a horrible human being. You're a sinful youth. No, that's when he wants to hear from you the most. When you have closed off the world, when you've hit rock bottom. At that moment now, what ends up happening is that lost faith that you thought you had inside of you, you rediscover it. And now at the lowest of the lowest of the low, you think of God. And you raise your hands up. And and we all know, we have no right to ask God for anything. The dua is, Allah, please, out of your mercy and your grace, help me out here. I'm stuck. I'm sinking. I don't know what to do. And you think, is that the image we have of God? That we think for a second that he'll turn his face against us? He'll close the door? He'll slam the door in our face? No. How can we believe him to be like that? How can we not believe anything else but the fact that he'll embrace us? He'll cover us. He'll protect us. If we're shivering in the cold, he'll wrap his arms around us. We have to believe that. He tells us time and time again, "Ma yaf'alullahu bi'adabikum." What will I gain by punishing you? I won't get anything. Kataba ala nafsihi rahma. I've made mercy wajib upon myself. Why do you let shaitan come in and play around with the image? Why do you think I'm a cruel God, a nasty God, the one who enjoys to see you suffering? I don't. How much more must I do for you? How many more messages, how many more verses, how many more laws do you need to hear to understand the level of love that he has for you? Dua is not transactional. Dua is transformational. It's meant for a revolution, meant for an ascension. Imam Sajjad left behind a treasure of dua, and not just the idea of the importance of dua. He literally left the words behind, guys. If you want to pray for your parents, say these words. You want to pray for your kids, say these words. You want to welcome the month of Ramadan and bid farewell, say these words. If you are someone who is scared, if you are somebody who is repentant, somebody who's hopeful, somebody who is beseeching now, seeking Allah. All of these have various words. Simply say these words. Your kids are sick. These are your du'as. You feel low on your iman. This is your du'a. You want protection when you leave the house? Read this. The Ahlul Bayt have left behind the words. Not only have they said ask Allah, but this is how you ask Allah. So it's not sometimes about reading the du'a. It's about the right mentality in approaching the du'a. Reboot yourself, revive yourself, restart yourself. Understand the idea that dua is meant now to what? To instigate a revolution inside of us, to dust off the iman, say, look, this is the diamond that's been inside of you this whole time. It's been covered with ignorance and sin and the ego and individualism. You remove all the layers of dirt and you see that diamond has been there all along. And sometimes, I'm sorry, sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to see that diamond's been there this whole time. How many times have I heard young guys tell me, Asad, I'm a horrible human being. You have no idea. You have no idea. And yet I see that same kid who thinks he's a horrible being react during rock bottom in such a way that his iman now has increased. You would think you would complain to God. right? Ridicule God. Where are you now, God? No. Instead, you turn to God. But now turn to God, knowing with yaqeen full well that He'll open the door and embrace you. How can we think anything else? Inshallah, we continue our discussion tomorrow on this topic. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to forgive our sins in the month of Sha'ban, forgive the sins of our parents, inshallah. Those individuals, be it our equals in humanity or our sisters and brothers in faith, who have been afflicted with the COVID virus, we ask you, Allah, to please cure them, give them the strength to fight this virus. We ask you, Allah, please to bless our youth, strengthen our marriages, and elevate our families such that they are worthy to arrive with the Imam of our time, inshallah. Thank you very much. May Allah bless each and every one of you. We'll see you tomorrow night. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي ليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا قمر بني هاشم يا أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب يا زينب بنت أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء يا علي بن موسى رضا راضي بالقدر والقضاء. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. يا سيدي أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.